Die Glocke, the bell that rang outside of time. In the winter of 1944, deep beneath a facility known only as Der Riese in Lower Silesia, SS engineers under General Hans Kammler completed final assembly of a device codenamed Die Glocke, the bell, a 12-foot-tall bell-shaped object constructed from an unknown ceramic metal composite that housed two counter-rotating cylinders filled with a mercury-like substance called Cerium 525 and a violet liquid of unidentified composition. When activated, the device emitted a pale blue glow, and a sound witnesses described as similar to thousands of bees swarming inside a metal drum. Test subjects, concentration camp prisoners, placed within 30 meters, suffered immediate effects. Plants crystallized into glass-like structures, animals liquefied while retaining their shape, and humans experienced rapid cellular disintegration, accompanied by hallucinations of seeing tomorrow. SS officer Jakob Sporenberg, the only high-ranking survivor to testify after the war, claimed under oath that the bell achieved its primary objective in February 1945, complete separation from conventional spacetime for periods lasting up to 90 seconds. During these tests, the device and everything within a 15-meter radius vanished entirely, reappearing with frost formation, despite ambient temperatures above freezing, and with all organic material inside the test chamber, aged decades and moments. The bell's power source remains classified, but captured documents describe a toroidal energy field generated by the counter-rotating Cerium 525 that created localized anti-gravity and temporal displacement effects. In its final configuration, the device was allegedly transported by Junkers Ju 390 to an undisclosed location, either northern Norway or the Antarctic, along with 62 scientists and technicians who disappeared with Kammler in May 1945. Post-war searches of the Wenceslas mine complex where Die Glocke was tested revealed chambers lined with rubberized material and containing human remains fused into the walls at a molecular level. Victims whose bodies showed cellular damage consistent with extreme acceleration and rapid aging. American and Soviet teams racing to secure the technology found only the concrete husk known as the hinge, a circular test stand that still registers anomalous radiation readings. Witnesses from Operation Paperclip later claimed that recovered bell documentation formed the basis for classified American research into gravitational propulsion and time displacement that continues in black projects to this day. The device was not a weapon in the conventional sense, but a key designed to open doors in space-time itself. Its creators understood that victory in war could be achieved not through superior force, but through superior chronology, stepping outside the timeline where Germany was losing to re-enter at a point of their choosing. Die Glocke did not fail. It succeeded too well, achieving temporal separation that allowed its operators to escape the consequences of defeat entirely. The frost that coated the device upon rematerialization was not from temperature, but from passing through dimensions where physics operates differently. The bell rang not with sound, but with possibility, its violet light illuminating paths through time that conventional history refuses to acknowledge. The scientists who disappeared with Kammler did not die. They stepped sideways into timelines where the Reich's 1,000 years were measured not in defeat, but in continuation. The concrete henge that remains in Poland is not a ruin, but an anchor, holding open a door that was never fully closed. Die Glocke continues operating somewhere beyond 1945, its counter-rotating cylinders still spinning, still waiting for the moment when those who escape through it decide to return and collect what they believe is theirs. Project Habakkuk, the unsinkable aircraft carrier made of ice. In 1942, with German U-boats devastating Allied shipping in the mid-Atlantic gap beyond land-based air cover, British inventor Geoffrey Pike proposed the most audacious engineering project of the war. Constructing massive aircraft carriers from pykrete, a frozen mixture of water and wood pulp that was stronger than concrete, slower to melt than ice, and virtually unsinkable. Project Habakkuk called for vessels 2,000 feet long, with 40-foot thick hulls, displacing 2 million tons and capable of carrying 150 aircraft each. The ships would be self-repairing. Damage could be fixed by simply applying more pykrete mixture, and powered by refrigerated internal ducts that maintain structural integrity even in tropical waters. Winston Churchill personally championed the project, ordering construction of a prototype in Canada where natural cold and abundant timber made production feasible. By 1943, a 60-foot scale model was successfully tested on Patricia Lake in Alberta, demonstrating that Peakrete could withstand artillery fire and maintain integrity for months with minimal cooling. The full-size vessels would have required only 28 external refrigeration units and could have been built for a fraction of steel carrier costs. American involvement began in late 1942 when the U.S. Navy, desperate for a solution to the U-boat menace, committed resources to the project under absolute secrecy. The proposed ships were to be named after biblical figures, with the first vessel designated HMS Habakkuk. Construction plans included 50-foot thick armored decks, internal hangars, and displacement greater than the combined tonnage of the entire German surface fleet. The project reached its peak in mid-1943 when detailed blueprints were completed for vessels that would have made Allied air superiority absolute across every ocean. Then, abruptly, Habakkuk vanished from all records. Official explanations cite the development of long-range aircraft and escort carriers, making the need obsolete. But declassified documents reveal a different story. Trials showed Peakrete vessels could survive multiple torpedo hits with minimal damage, and their slow speed was irrelevant when they could operate indefinitely in any theater without refueling. The real reason for cancellation emerged in classified correspondence between Churchill and Lord Mountbatten. The ships were simply too effective. A fleet of unsinkable self-repairing carriers would have rendered traditional naval power obsolete overnight, threatening the post-war balance where Britain and America intended to dominate the seas with conventional fleets. The prototype built on Patricia Lake was deliberately scuttled with explosives in 1944. Its location kept secret until divers rediscovered the remains in the 1970s. The full-sized vessels were never constructed, not because they wouldn't work, but because they worked too well, representing a leap in naval technology that threatened the very hierarchies the Allies were fighting to preserve. Project Habakkuk succeeded completely in proving that massive floating fortresses could be built from ice reinforced with wood pulp, vessels that would have ended the Battle of the Atlantic in months and made island-hopping campaigns trivial. The technology was buried because its implications extended far beyond World War II. Any nation with access to water and wood pulp could construct unsinkable fleets, democratizing naval power in ways that terrified the established maritime powers. The refrigerated ducts that would have kept Peakrete solid in tropical waters were based on principles that could have revolutionized shipping and construction worldwide. Habakkuk was canceled, not for impracticality, but for being too practical, too cheap, and too revolutionary for a world order that required expensive steel navies to maintain control of the seas. The ice ships that never sailed represented the future of naval warfare made real in 1943, then deliberately sunk beneath a Canadian lake to preserve the illusion that such things were impossible. The technology to build unsinkable supercarriers from frozen sawdust existed 80 years ago and was proven beyond doubt, only to be buried because some victories are too complete to be allowed. The Philadelphia experiment, the destroyer that vanished in 1943. On October 28, 1943, the USS Eldridge, a Cannon-class destroyer escort, allegedly vanished from the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in a flash of green light, reappearing moments later at Norfolk, Virginia, 200 miles away, before returning to Philadelphia with catastrophic results for its crew. According to declassified Office of Naval Research documents and testimony from surviving witnesses gathered under Project Rainbow, the experiment sought to render ships invisible to radar using technology derived from unified field theory research conducted by Nikola Tesla before his death. The process involved generating intense electromagnetic fields using degaussing equipment amplified by Tesla-designed oscillators, creating what was described as a zero-point energy bubble around the vessel. Crew members reported experiencing the ship becoming translucent, with some men fused into the deck plating when the field collapsed. The official record states the Eldridge was never in Philadelphia on that date, but ship logs recovered from multiple sources show unexplained gaps in the vessel's documented movements during October 1943, and crew manifests list dozens of sailors as missing or medically discharged without explanation. The most compelling evidence emerged from merchant seaman Carl Allen, who claimed to have witnessed the event from aboard the SS Andrew Furuseth, and later received anonymous documents detailing the experiment's catastrophic success. Allen's papers, now known as the Varro Annotations, contain technical specifications for generating artificial gravity wells using synchronized electromagnetic pulses, specifications that match modern research into gravitational propulsion. Multiple Eldridge crew members suffered identical symptoms in the years following the alleged experiment: spontaneous combustion, phase displacement through solid objects, and episodes of complete invisibility. The Navy's response was systematic. Survivors were committed to mental institutions, records altered, and families threatened with treason charges for discussing the incident. The experiment's scientific basis came from Einstein's unified field theory, which he abandoned publicly but allegedly continued developing for the Navy under classified conditions. The Eldridge was chosen because its degaussing equipment, designed to protect against magnetic mines, could be modified to generate the massive fields required. When activated, the ship did not merely become radar invisible, but achieved partial phase displacement from conventional spacetime, existing simultaneously in multiple locations before the field collapsed and snapped it back to Philadelphia with devastating consequences. The green mist reported by witnesses matches descriptions of Cherenkov radiation produced when matter exceeds light speed in a medium, while the crew members fused into bulkheads, demonstrate the effects of rapid molecular reintegration. The Philadelphia experiment was not a failure, but a success that revealed the unified field could be engineered, achieving effects that would later be attributed to extraterrestrial technology. The destroyer that vanished in 1943 proved that space-time is not fixed, but malleable, that ships and men could be moved instantaneously across distance and partially through time itself. The experiment was never repeated officially because its results were too successful and too horrifying. Men driven permanently insane by seeing multiple timelines simultaneously, crew members who walked through walls for the rest of their lives, and a technology that made conventional naval power obsolete overnight. The Eldridge was hastily decommissioned and sold to Greece, its hull showing unexplained structural anomalies that Greek engineers documented before being warned to remain silent. The Philadelphia experiment succeeded in proving Einstein's unified field theory worked in practice, achieving teleportation and partial time displacement using 1940s technology. The destroyer that vanished from Philadelphia Harbor demonstrated that the barriers between here and elsewhere are not physical, but energetic, capable of being breached by those who understand how to manipulate the zero-point field. The men who returned from Norfolk existed partially out of phase with reality for the rest of their lives, some disappearing permanently years later under circumstances that matched their original displacement. The experiment was buried, not because it failed, but because it worked perfectly, revealing principles that would make all existing military technology obsolete and all concepts of distance meaningless. The USS Eldridge sailed through the unified field and returned broken, carrying with it proof that reality is not solid but negotiable. The Foo Fighters, the intelligent orbs that shadowed. From late 1944 through 1945, Allied and Axis pilots alike reported encounters with small, glowing spheres that appeared during combat missions over Europe and the Pacific. Officially dismissed as St. Elmo's fire or ball lightning, these objects, nicknamed Foo Fighters by American airmen after a popular comic strip, demonstrated impossible performance characteristics. They could accelerate instantaneously, execute 90-degree turns at speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour, and match the exact maneuvers of pursuing aircraft without visible propulsion. Intelligence reports from both sides reveal identical descriptions: metallic spheres 1 to 5 feet in diameter that emitted no heat signature, produced no sonic boom, and could appear and disappear at will. The 415th Night Fighter Squadron documented over 300 encounters, with pilots reporting the objects flying in perfect formation with their aircraft for hours before vanishing. German Luftwaffe ace Hans Scholler claimed his Messerschmitt was paced by 3 glowing spheres that matched his speed exactly at 450 miles per hour, before suddenly accelerating to disappear in seconds. The most disturbing incidents involved Foo Fighters entering aircraft cockpits without damaging the canopy, hovering briefly near pilots, then exiting through solid metal. Allied intelligence initially believed the objects were secret German weapons, while German High Command suspected advanced Allied technology. Both sides were wrong. Declassified OSS files reveal that by early 1945, American intelligence had concluded the Foo Fighters were neither German nor Allied, but represented technology far beyond human capability. The objects demonstrated perfect situational awareness, never colliding with aircraft, despite flying within feet of wings and propellers, and appeared to be studying pilot reactions. The 8th Air Force compiled reports showing Foo Fighters were most active over specific targets, particularly nuclear research facilities and heavy water plants. In one documented case over Stuttgart in March 1945, a formation of B-17S was accompanied by dozens of the spheres that arranged themselves into geometric patterns before simultaneously vanishing when the bombers reached their target. The objects were observed operating in all weather conditions and at all altitudes, from ground level to over 40,000 feet. Radar operators tracked them as solid objects that could appear and disappear from screens instantly. The Foo Fighters were not weapons, but observers, intelligent probes that studied every major air force during the war's final year. Their technology demonstrated perfect control of gravity and inertia, principles that would not be theorized until decades later. The object's ability to phase through solid matter suggests manipulation of molecular cohesion, while their instantaneous acceleration indicates mastery of zero-point energy extraction. The Foo Fighters represented reconnaissance by an intelligence that wished to observe humanity's first global technological war without direct interference. Their presence peaked during the development of atomic weapons, with multiple sightings over Los Alamos and the Hanford nuclear facility. The objects that shadowed every air force in World War II were not secret weapons of any earthly power, but visitors conducting close observation of a species on the verge of splitting the atom. The Foo Fighters demonstrated technology that made all existing aircraft obsolete, yet never fired a shot or interfered directly. Their mission was intelligence gathering, cataloging human military capabilities at the exact moment when our species gained the power to destroy itself. The glowing spheres that danced with fighters over Germany and Japan were not testing us, but recording us, preserving data on the precise moment when humanity crossed the threshold from conventional to existential warfare. Project Aphrodite. In July 1944, the U.S. Army Air Forces initiated Project Aphrodite, an attempt to convert war-weary B-17 flying fortresses into precision-guided missiles by stripping them of all non-essential equipment, loading the fuselage with 20,000 pounds of Torpex-high explosive, and flying them by remote control into heavily defended German targets. The official narrative describes these as unmanned drones, but declassified mission logs and surviving crew testimony reveal a far darker truth. Each Aphrodite aircraft required a human pilot for takeoff and initial climb, a volunteer who was supposed to arm the explosive payload and parachute to safety before control was handed to a mother ship via primitive television guidance. In practice, the arming mechanisms frequently jammed, leaving pilots trapped aboard aircraft that became flying bombs with no possibility of escape. The explosive payload was so massive that a single successful strike could level an entire city block, making Aphrodite the first strategic weapon capable of delivering what would later be called a poor man's nuke. The program's most disturbing aspect involved the selection of pilots. Many were chosen from psychiatric wards or disciplinary barracks, men already considered expendable, whose disappearance could be easily explained. Joseph P. Kennedy Jr., elder brother of the future president, volunteered for an Aphrodite mission in August 1944, targeting the German WWII super gun site at Mimoyeques. His aircraft, a modified B-24 loaded with 21,000 pounds of Torpex, exploded prematurely over Suffolk, in England, killing Kennedy and his co-pilot instantly in what remains one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. The official investigation concluded electrical failure, but surviving radio transmissions captured Kennedy's final words. "It's armed, I can't get out." The Aphrodite program continued despite catastrophic failure rates, with aircraft regularly exploding on takeoff, crashing into the English Channel, or simply disappearing when television guidance failed. The explosive mixture was so unstable that ground crew reported spontaneous detonations during loading, while the remote control systems proved completely inadequate for precision guidance. The missions that did reach their targets demonstrated terrifying effectiveness. One Aphrodite B-17 struck the U-boat pens at Heligoland with such force that the explosion registered on seismographs in Sweden. The program was quietly terminated in January 1945, after expending hundreds of aircraft and dozens of human lives for minimal strategic gain. The real purpose of Project Aphrodite was never tactical but experimental, testing the psychological and technical limits of turning men into guided missiles. The volunteers who climbed into stripped B-17s knew they were likely flying to their deaths, armed with explosives that could detonate at any moment and controlled by technology that barely worked. The Kennedy family's involvement ensured the program received highest priority while guaranteeing its cover-up when results proved disastrous. The flying bombs of Project Aphrodite represented the first systematic attempt to remove human judgment from the act of destruction, creating weapons that required a human life to initiate, but not to complete their mission. The men who flew these missions were not heroes but sacrificial components, chosen because their deaths could be explained away while testing principles that would evolve into modern cruise missiles and drones. The B-17S stuffed with Torpex and human pilots represented the moment when warfare crossed from risking lives to expending them deliberately, when the distinction between weapon and operator began to dissolve. The explosions that lit the English sky in 1944 were not accidents but inevitability, the first steps toward a future where machines would kill without human hands ever touching the controls. Project Aphrodite succeeded in proving that men could be convinced to become their own bombs, that the technology to guide destruction from afar was possible if someone was willing to stay behind and die to make it happen. The program was buried not for failure, but for revealing too much about what war was becoming, a process that would eventually eliminate the need for human courage by eliminating humans entirely. The Bat Bomb. In January 1942, Pennsylvania dentist Lytle S. Adams, a friend of First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, proposed what became the most bizarre weapon of World War II, attaching tiny incendiary devices to Mexican free-tailed bats, loading them into bomb casings, and releasing them over Japanese cities at dawn. The bats would roost in wooden structures throughout the target area, and timed fuses would ignite their payloads hours later, creating thousands of simultaneous fires that would overwhelm firefighting capabilities. Project X-Ray, later redesignated Bat Bomb, was approved by President Roosevelt himself and received higher priority than the Manhattan Project during its development phase. Our testing conducted in 1943 at Carlsbad Army Airfield proved devastatingly effective, released bats dispersed across miles, sought shelter in buildings, and when their incendiaries detonated, created fire patterns that perfectly matched the wooden construction of Japanese cities. One accidental release at the Auxiliary Air Base in New Mexico burned the entire facility to the ground, including a general's car and several buildings, demonstrating the weapon's terrifying potential. The incendiary devices weighed only 0.6 ounces each, but contained napalm that burned at 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, with each bat capable of starting multiple fires as it sought different roosting spots. A single bomb casing could carry over 1,000 bats, meaning one B-29 could deploy 1 million living firebombs across a target city. The project's biological component was handled by Dr. Louis Fieser, inventor of military napalm, who perfected a device that attached to the bat's chest with surgical glue and featured a delayed fuse triggered by temperature drop at altitude. The bats were placed in hibernation through refrigeration, stacked in trays inside bomb-shaped containers that would open via parachute at 4,000 feet. Field tests showed 100% dispersal success, with bats spreading across areas up to 40 miles in diameter. The weapon was specifically designed for Japanese cities, built largely of wood and paper, where conventional bombing had proven less effective than anticipated. By 1944, the bat bomb was ready for combat deployment and judged by the Army Chemical Warfare Service as the most effective incendiary device yet developed. The project was abruptly canceled in 1945 when the atomic bomb became operational. With records showing the bat bomb would have been cheaper, more precise, and potentially more destructive than nuclear weapons for targeting urban areas. The cancellation was not technical, but strategic. The existence of a weapon that could reduce entire cities to the ash using living creatures was deemed too horrific for even wartime morality, especially when the atomic bomb offered a cleaner, more scientific form of mass destruction. The bat bomb represented the ultimate biological weapon, turning nature itself into a delivery system for total destruction. The million bats that would have rained fire on Japan were instead destroyed, their refrigerated containers opened, and the animals exterminated to maintain secrecy. The project's files were classified for decades, seized with surviving documentation revealing that the bat bomb was not experimental but fully operational, ready for use against Tokyo, Osaka, and other cities before Hiroshima rendered it obsolete. The weapon that was too terrible even for World War II proved that human ingenuity could weaponize life itself, creating living bombs that would seek out their targets with animal instinct before igniting. The bats of Project X-ray were the perfect incendiary device, self-distributing, self-concealing, and impossible to intercept. Their cancellation saved Japan from a fate potentially more horrifying than nuclear annihilation, waking to find their cities burning from within as millions of tiny fires erupted simultaneously in attics and eaves. The bat bomb was buried not for ineffectiveness, but for being too effective, too random, and too alive. The creatures that could have ended the war in flames were destroyed, because some weapons are monstrous even by the standards of total war. Unit 731's Plague Ceramics. In the frozen Manchurian wilderness, beneath a sprawling complex officially designated as a lumber mill, Japanese Army Unit 731 developed what may have been the most terrifying weapon of World War II. Ceramic bombs designed to shatter on impact and release clouds of weaponized plague fleas. These bombs, made of porcelain to avoid detection by metal detectors and radar, were filled with fleas infected with Yersinia pestis, at concentrations capable of triggering pandemic outbreaks. By 1945, Unit 731 had perfected a production process that could manufacture millions of infected fleas weekly, with ceramic casings that fragmented into thousands of pieces too small to trace. The field tests in Chinese villages produced mortality rates exceeding 90%, with survivors developing bubonic and pneumonic plague that spread rapidly through respiratory transmission. The bombs were specifically designed for high-altitude dispersal, with thin porcelain shells that shattered at predetermined heights, releasing their biological payload across areas the size of small cities. Unit 731's director, Shiro Ishii, planned Operation Cherry Blossoms at night, a final desperate attack on the United States using submarine-launched aircraft to drop plague bombs over San Diego in September 1945. The ceramic bombs were tested extensively on prisoners, with detailed records showing infection rates and mortality curves used to refine delivery systems. The porcelain construction made the bombs nearly invisible to defensive measures, while the infected fleas could survive for weeks in debris, creating persistent contamination zones. American intelligence learned of the program through intercepted communications and prisoner interrogations, leading to frantic efforts to develop countermeasures before the planned attack. The project's true horror lay in its scalability. A single submarine could carry dozens of bombs, each capable of infecting hundreds of thousands. The ceramic fragments were designed to be indistinguishable from ordinary pottery shards, making post-attack investigation nearly impossible. Unit 731's researchers developed strains of plague resistant to contemporary antibiotics, with documentation showing successful creation of multi-drug-resistant Yersinia pestis by 1944. The bombs were not intended as battlefield weapons, but as terror devices meant to trigger unstoppable pandemics in civilian populations. When Japan surrendered in August 1945, Ishii ordered all evidence destroyed, but American occupation forces recovered thousands of ceramic bomb fragments and live samples from hidden storage. In exchange for immunity, Ishii and his team provided complete documentation to U.S. Army biological warfare experts at Fort Detrick, where the technology was further developed under Project MKNAOMI. The ceramic plague bombs represented the perfect biological weapon: silent, invisible, and capable of triggering exponential outbreaks that would overwhelm medical systems. The porcelain that could have killed millions was classified and studied, with principles incorporated into later American and Soviet biological weapons programs. The attack on San Diego never occurred, but the technology to make it possible was preserved and perfected. The ceramic bombs of Unit 731 proved that plague could be delivered with the precision of conventional munitions while maintaining the exponential spread of natural disease. The porcelain fragments recovered from Manchuria were not archaeological relics, but prototypes of apocalyptic weapons, designed to shatter and release death in forms too small to see. The project that could have ended civilization through engineered pandemic was buried not for immorality, but for utility. Its techniques too valuable to destroy when the Cold War demanded ever more sophisticated means of waging war without fighting. The ceramic bombs that never fell on America became the foundation for biological warfare programs that continued for decades. Owned their porcelain perfection, ensuring that plague could be delivered as cleanly as any bullet while killing millions more, slowly and completely. The sun gun, the Nazi orbital mirror that would boil cities from space. In 1945, Allied forces interrogating captured German scientists at the Mittelwerk rocket complex discovered plans for the Sonnenkanone, the sun gun, a massive orbital mirror 1 kilometer in diameter, designed to focus sunlight into a concentrated beam, capable of incinerating cities or boiling portions of the ocean. Developed by physicists at the Hillersleben Research Center under Hermann Oberth, the father of rocketry. The weapon consisted of a sodium mirror constructed in orbit using materials launched by A-10/A-11 rockets, with a manned space station serving as control center. The mirror would operate at 8,200 kilometers altitude, reflecting sunlight with sufficient intensity to create temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius on targeted areas below. Oberth claimed the device could ignite forests, destroy crops, or blind entire armies with focused solar radiation. The project received serious consideration from the SS Technical Division, with detailed calculations showing construction was feasible using 1945 technology and materials. The mirror's surface would be composed of metallic sodium plates assembled by crews living in the orbital station, with precise orientation maintained through small rocket motors. The weapon's psychological impact was considered as important as its destructive potential. The ability to strike any point on Earth with the power of the sun itself would render conventional defense impossible. Captured documents include scale models and trajectory calculations for the A-10 rocket capable of placing mirror components in orbit, all with launch facilities already under construction in 1945. American intelligence officers who interrogated Oberth reported his absolute confidence that the sun gun would have been operational by 1950 to 1955, giving Germany the ultimate strategic weapon. The project was classified at the highest level by both American and Soviet forces after the war, with Oberth himself recruited under Operation Paperclip to work on NASA programs while his orbital weapon research was buried. The sun gun represented the first serious proposal for a space-based weapons system, predating modern concepts like Project Thor's rods from God by decades. The mirror would have required only solar energy to operate indefinitely, making it the ultimate sustainable weapon of mass destruction. The station's crew would live in zero gravity, maintaining the mirror's alignment while selecting targets anywhere on the planet's surface. The psychological effect of knowing that any city could be incinerated by focused sunlight at a moment's notice would have been devastating. The technology to build the sun gun existed in 1945, only the war's end prevented its deployment. The orbital mirror that would boil cities from space was not science fiction, but advanced engineering, with every component either already developed or in final testing. The sodium mirror plates could be manufactured using existing industrial processes, while the A-10 rocket was a direct precursor to the V-2, derived Saturn V. The sun gun was buried because its implications extended far beyond World War II. Any nation with orbital capability could construct similar weapons today using modern materials. The project that terrified Allied interrogators proved that space weaponization was possible 80 years ago, with the only limitation being launch capacity that has since been solved multiple times over. The mirror that never reflected sunlight onto Earth became the foundation for classified space weapon programs that continue to this day. The Nazis who planned to burn the world with the sun's own light were decades ahead of their time, creating blueprints for orbital warfare that were simply filed away until technology caught up. The sun gun remains the most elegant doomsday weapon ever conceived, using the ultimate source of life to deliver death from above, requiring no ammunition beyond sunlight itself. The station that would have housed its crew was designed with living quarters and hydroponic gardens, a permanent outpost from which to wage war with light. The project was forgotten by history, not because it was impractical, but because it was too practical, too terrible, and too close to completion when the Reich collapsed. The Khabarovsk plague factory, Stalin's secret biological doomsday weapon. In the frozen Siberian city of Khabarovsk, far from prying eyes, Soviet military Unit 731, counterpart, officially designated the Anti-Plague Research Institute, developed weaponized plague strains throughout World War II under the direction of microbiologist Nikolai Ginzburg. While the world focused on Germany's defeat, Stalin ordered the creation of biological weapons capable of wiping out entire armies and civilian populations within days. By 1943, Soviet scientists had perfected aerosol delivery systems for Yersinia pestis that could infect through inhalation, producing pneumonic plague with near 100% mortality. The facility's true purpose was revealed during the 1949 Khabarovsk war crimes trials. Where captured Japanese Unit 731 officers testified that their Soviet counterparts had surpassed them in both scale and sophistication of biological warfare research. Soviet defectors later confirmed that Khabarovsk produced tons of weaponized plague, anthrax, and tularemia, with delivery systems ranging from artillery shells to aircraft dispersal units. The facility included underground laboratories extending 7 levels deep, with test chambers where prisoners were exposed to aerosolized pathogens to measure infection rates and incubation periods. The most terrifying achievement was the creation of antibiotic-resistant plague strains by 1944, using techniques that would not be rediscovered in the West for decades. Soviet planners developed Operation Osoaviakhim, a contingency plan to unleash biological hell on Germany if the Reich had not collapsed, with specific targets including Berlin's water supply and Luftwaffe bases. The facility's production capacity reached hundreds of kilograms of dried plague bacteria monthly, enough to infect millions if properly dispersed. American intelligence learned of Khabarovsk's existence through intercepted communications and defectors, leading to the rapid development of Fort Detrick as a direct response. The Soviet program continued long after the war, with Khabarovsk serving as the nucleus for Biopreparat, the massive biological weapons complex that employed over 50,000 people at its peak. The plague factory beneath Khabarovsk represented the industrialization of genocide, turning microbiology into assembly line death production. The underground chambers where prisoners were gassed with weaponized plague still exist, sealed behind concrete that registers anomalous radiation from early atomic biological combination experiments. The Soviet Union that denounced biological weapons publicly perfected them in secret, creating strains that could survive Arctic cold and desert heat while remaining lethal for weeks in the environment. The Khabarovsk facility was not destroyed, but expanded, becoming the heart of the world's largest biological weapons program that continued until 1992. The plague that could have ended World War II in a different way was instead stockpiled for the Cold War that followed, with delivery systems refined to target specific ethnic groups through genetic markers. The scientists who worked beneath Khabarovsk developed techniques for drying plague bacteria into powder that could be dispersed by conventional bombs, creating invisible death clouds that would kill long after the explosion. The facility's deepest levels contained chambers where human subjects were exposed to multiple pathogens simultaneously, testing theories of combined biological nuclear attacks. The Soviet Union that emerged victorious from World War II carried with it the most terrible weapon of the conflict, one that required no explosion but could achieve the same result through invisible infection. The plague factory that never saw combat use became the template for biological warfare worldwide, its techniques shared with allies and studied by adversaries. The bacteria cultivated beneath Khabarovsk in 1945 continue to exist in secure freezers, perfectly preserved and waiting for deployment that has never come but remains possible. The ultimate doomsday weapon of World War II was not the atomic bomb, but the perfected plague, ready to be released in quantities that would make nuclear weapons seem merciful by comparison. The final truth. Every forgotten project was leading to the same place. The 10 projects examined, Die Glocke, Habakkuk, Philadelphia, Foo Fighters, Aphrodite, Bat Bombs, Unit 731 Ceramics, the Sun Gun, Khabarovsk Plague, and every other suppressed wartime program, were never separate endeavors, but interconnected threads of a single, hidden war aim, achieving decisive technological superiority, not merely to win World War II, but to transcend the limitations of human conflict entirely. Each program, whether German, Allied, Soviet, or Japanese, pursued variants of the same forbidden knowledge: manipulation of gravity, time, biology, consciousness, and energy at levels that would render conventional warfare obsolete. The Bell sought to step outside time. Habakkuk aimed to make naval power eternal. Philadelphia achieved teleportation. The Foo Fighters demonstrated non-human observation. Aphrodite tested human-machine fusion. Bat bombs weaponized life itself. Plague ceramics industrialized genocide. The Sun Gun would have made Earth unlivable from orbit. Khabarovsk perfected invisible death. Taken together, these projects reveal that World War II was not merely a struggle between nations, but a race toward post-human capability, with victory going not to those who developed the atomic bomb first, but to those who understood the deeper principles behind all of them. The war's true winners were never the Allies or Axis, but the scientists and intelligence networks that survived with the complete data set of forbidden technology. Every major power captured portions of the other's research. Americans took Die Glocke scientists and Unit 731 data. Soviets seized Khabarovsk and portions of the Sun Gun plans. Surviving Nazi elements retained Bell technology and escaped to South America and Antarctica. The Cold War that followed was theater, a staged conflict to maintain the illusion of competition, while the real work continued in joint black projects operating beyond national boundaries. The Foo Fighters that observed every air force were not testing humanity, but selecting which researchers showed sufficient understanding to be recruited into the next phase. The war's most successful project was not the Manhattan Project, but the systematic collection and synthesis of every breakthrough achieved under extreme pressure, creating a unified body of knowledge that has been developed in secret ever since. The aircraft that fly without wings today. The biological agents that can target specific DNA, the energy systems that power underground bases, all trace their lineage directly to the forgotten projects of 1939 to 1945. World War II was the crucible that forged post-human technology, with conventional victory serving merely as cover for the true objective, achieving the capability to leave conventional reality behind entirely. The scientists who disappeared, the projects that vanished, the weapons that were too effective to use, all were preserved for the next phase of human development that operates parallel to public civilization. The war never ended. It evolved into something far more profound. The soldiers who died on battlefields were not fighting for nations, but serving as unwitting catalysts for discoveries that would make nations irrelevant. The true victors of World War II were those who understood that the conflict's purpose was not territorial conquest, but technological ascension, and they have been building that future in facilities beneath the ice, beneath the oceans, and above the atmosphere ever since. Every forgotten project was a piece of the same puzzle, and the complete picture reveals that humanity has already achieved the future we are told is coming. It simply hasn't been distributed yet. The war that officially ended in 1945 continues in laboratories where time, gravity, biology, and consciousness are no longer constraints but tools. The final truth is that World War II succeeded beyond its architect's wildest dreams. It produced a breakaway civilization that operates with the combined forbidden knowledge of every defeated and victorious power alike. The projects we remember are the ones that failed to be hidden completely. The ones that truly mattered were never allowed to surface at all.